Hi, and welcome to What the Phalange, the podcast where we watch every episode of Friends, discuss it, deconstruct it, and fan over it, one episode at a time.
My name is Emily, pronouns she and her.
And my name is Quinn, pronouns ze/zere or they, them.
This week we're talking about Season 1, Episode 12, the one with the dozen lasagnas. This episode aired on January 12th, 1995. It was written by Jeff Astroff, Mike Sikowitz, Adam Chase, and Ira Ungerleider. It was directed by Paul Lazaris.
This is the episode where Paolo gropes Phoebe at her place of work. Ross doesn't want to know what the genitals of his baby are, but everyone else is talking about it. And Joey and Chandler buy a table.
Woohoo! Let's get into it.
Do do boop 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 boop. It's not. I know it's not.
That's not the song.
No, it's not.
But the episode does start with a song.
It does.
And it's not that one.
Okay, so before we get into it, if you haven't seen the episode in a little while, we just want to reiterate that Phoebe gets groped in this episode, and we are going to be talking about that.
Trigger warning for sexual assault in the workplace. We're having a lot of fun today when we realize that literally every episode we talk about sexual assault. It's not great. This is the show we consumed when we were young.
Just drives home how prevalent rape culture is in our media.
And you only notice when you make a podcast about it.
Cold open.
Cold open. Well, first of all, what are your initial thoughts and feels about this episode?
Okay, so my initial thoughts is that I feel like every second episode, the outfits are stellar. And it's like, kind of like go back and forth.
Interesting.
Yeah, I find it, anyway, that's what I've been noticing myself. But are you talking about, what are the three things that I want to talk about?
Oh, fuck. I keep forgetting that we're supposed to write these things down. Sure, go for it. You tell me, you say the three things that you want to talk about while I think of the three things I want to talk about.
To be fair, I didn't write three things down.
Okay.
But one of the main things I want to talk about today is, the main thing on the table, I think, is talking about the concept of making a pass on and sexual assault in the workplace, especially because I myself am a massage therapist and
Quinn's got lived experience, but maybe not of groping in the workplace, but lived experience of being a massage therapist,
being locked in a quiet room with a strange person. Yeah.
Well, when you put it that way.
And I want to talk about the concept of a fetus being healthy, the storyline around Carol being pregnant at this point, and what happens there. Oh, right. And I want to talk about the shame that we can very easily impose on ourselves when we realize that we're in a relationship with someone who we didn't think, who isn't who we thought they were.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. I'm stressed.
Sorry.
This is gonna be a heavy podcast today. Okay, I want to talk about why, no matter how mad or jealous or horrible a person is, you should never call immigration on them.
Oh my God.
I want to talk about New York queer rights in 1995, because I think that every time Susan's in the show, I just want to talk about gay shit. And then I want to talk about groping and sexual assault in the workplace. But then I also want to talk about sex reveal, gender reveals, and the whole feels around that shit show. Okay, cold open. This is a great scene.
Okay.
Top 10 cold opens.
So Emily, what song is it that they are humming?
Okay. It is the Odd Couple theme. Yeah, check it out.
We'll do a YouTube link so you can listen to it.
Odd Couple theme. But it's
yeah. So okay, wait. Your Odd Couples theme song, is that a?
It was a show from the 1970s. And it was just an American sitcom about two guys. That's about all I got.
So it's like came out around the time of I Dream of Jeannie, which is the next song that they hum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So
I think this is one of my favorite scenes because first of all, there's like no actual dialogue except for when Chandler says,
no, we're done.
No, we're done. Which is such a Chandler thing to say.
Yeah.
But like, I also just think it's like such a cute friends moment. Like it's one of those moments that like I could imagine happening in a group of friends, but then like it would never be recreated. You know, it would just be like one of those moments. And so then I think it's so funny when Ross tries to do it again. And Chandler's like, no, because Chandler's recognizing that, this was a one-time cute thing. We're not going to try to recreate it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm so that person. Like, I'm so a Ross in that situation. Because, like, whenever something funny or cute happens as a family, like, I always want to, like, repeat it. I'm always like, I'll try to keep the joke going, or I'll try to keep, like, things going, and then it just got less funny. You don't remember this as a young
as a kid,
woman?
I think you were the Ross, but I think now you're the Chandler.
Wow.
Just saying.
It's making me reflect upon my life a lot. Oh, no.
Sorry.
I went from being, like, young and cute and wanting to keep jokes going to being, like, sad, angry, and, like...
Okay, you guys, we just triggered an
resentful
existential crisis for Emily. Sorry.
All right. 2020 hasn't turned out like anyone has expected. For us, the current pandemic left us in an existential crisis wondering what the heck we're doing with our lives. And when is a better time to start a podcast than when you're not sure what you're doing with your life?
When we finally made the decision to start our podcast, we spent a lot of time researching and debating which podcast host to use. You need a podcast host in order to have your podcast available in a variety of different directories, which is the reason you're probably listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. They all cost money, and they all have their strengths. But the reason we chose Buzzsprout to host us is because they are designed for new podcasters.
They have a variety of different tools to support you on your journey towards starting a new podcast. Knowing that creating this podcast is going to take a lot of our time and a lot of our money, we are particularly grateful that Buzzsprout offers an affiliate link marketplace, providing us with partnerships with quality brands that we can advertise. We don't get any money for the advertisements themselves. However, if you use our affiliate link in the show notes to purchase one of the products, we get a kickback at no additional expense to you.
So today we're repping Buzzsprout because we have the first-hand experience to say that it was the right decision to use them. And if you're thinking of starting a podcast because you're also experiencing a pandemic existential crisis, then you should do it. And you should use Buzzsprout and our affiliate link to do so. Following the link in our show notes lets Buzzsprout know that we sent you. It also gets you a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan. And most importantly, to us, it helps support our show.
If you don't want to hear an advertisement, make sure you go to our Patreon page and you can pay $5 a month to get...
No, $8 a month.
$8 a month to get this podcast ad-free and early release.
Also, if you pay $5 a month, instead, you'll get a sticker and a link to our bonus episode.
Ba-ba-ba.
Secret bonus episode.
Wow. That was special. All right, moving on.
Like your face.
Okay, we're in Monica's apartment.
And Monica has like 1 million lasagnas.
It's 12. Monica has a dozen lasagnas. Okay, as someone who cooks and bakes and like has worked in kitchens, I would be so fucking pissed.
I know.
If as a favor to someone, I made them 12 lasagnas as a favor. It's not even like she's like, maybe she paid her for ingredients. Like, it just like was being friendly. And she failed to mention the one thing about the fact that they needed to be vegetarian lasagnas.
And then won't accept them. It's so, yeah.
But also then what Monica says is not valid. She's like, maybe you could just scrape the meat off of every third layer.
I think it's like valid within the context of what's happening.
Yeah,
where
totally.
she's like, it shouldn't be on me. Like, you should figure it out at this point.
That's so funny.
But also, like, lasagna is like the least, like,
scrapeable.
like demeatifying food that exists.
Yeah, so Ross wants to navigate through a uterus, which is hilarious. I love that. I love when he's like, plop me down in any uterus and I'll find my way out.
No compass.
No compass.
I don't think the compass really matters.
Like, Ross knows more about uteruses than I do, if that's the case, because I don't think I could be plopped into a uterus and find my way out. No, it depends how small I was compared to the uterus. Wait, are we talking like magic school bus size? Like you shrink down with the whole class and you're in someone's uterus?
I wonder if there's an episode where
Did they do that? Oh, we should have looked
reproductive
this up.
system. Okay, so I feel like this. First of all, when Joey does a thing where he's like with his fingers,
Yeah.
First of all, the distance that his fingers are is inaccurate portrayal of the size of the fetus at that time.
Because
Like, he
Carol's
probably
supposed to
has
be
about-
19 weeks pregnant.
Yeah, the fetus would be about 7 inches.
The size of a mango.
Size of a mango.
A large mango. We did look up some stuff.
But so not only is that inaccurate, but I also think that this is sort of like kind of the seeds are really starting to grow now of like it being demasculinating to Ross to have an ex who is a lesbian. Like
Right.
making fun of Ross directly.
Yeah. I get what you mean.
And I find that
But I do think that it's interesting because this is another time where like when Joey does that, Ross starts laughing. And like he's laughing and he's like rolling his eyes, you know? Whereas usually when Ross gets like poked fun of in the other episodes, like he gets very defensive. Like Ross is very aggressive, defensive, angry, and I think that maybe builds over the seasons. I want to first say I really like the juxtaposition of Rachel being like, I just feel so.
Yeah.
And then Ross is like nauseous, physically nauseous.
That's
and
a
like,
great
I don't know if
touch.
he's holding his knees or like his stomach, but he's just like rocking back and forth. But like, I have to give Ross like a fraction of sympathy here. Like if you can't see me, but my fingers are very, very close together when I say a fraction. Really tiny little bit of sympathy to Ross. Cause like that feeling of like being in love or really into someone who's really into someone else and like watching them fall in love with someone else, it is a nauseating feeling. Like sometimes it just feels really hard and like sickening. Like you feel physically ill sometimes through heartbreak. But moving on, what he then says afterwards.
It does not justify what comes after.
Okay, yes. And I want to spend only like a minute and a half talking about this, so I'm going to try. But,
Begin Emily unplanned rant now. Go.
Okay. Without getting too much into like my personal details of my life, like the immigration process is a really, really intense, fucked up process. You are constantly jumping through bureaucratic hoops in order to make yourself fit into, basically, for at least Canada, and I'm sure it's even worse in the States, like a white middle class to upper class ideal. Like that's what you're fitting yourself into. Like you have to be this perfect person in order to make it through the immigration system. And it takes, on like shorter periods, it could take a couple years. Longer periods, it could take a couple decades. And then there's another layer of it, which is like, okay, so Paolo is Italian. And I think that like this joke would hit me even harder if Paolo was a person of color.
Yeah.
Because there's this trope that comes up in television all the time, which is like the moment a character has an accent, somehow, somewhere, someone makes a joke about immigration. Like, especially if it's a person of color. Like, you see it all the time. Like, and like this constant joke of like, I'm going to call immigration. Because like, of course, obviously anyone with an accent is here illegally. Like, that's like a fucked up assumption to make. And then the third thing is that even if someone is here illegally, it has fucking nothing to do with you. So sit your ass down, don't pick up that goddamn phone, shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
like status is really scary, and like not so many people live in Canada without status. They don't have access to healthcare. They don't have access to any form of legal support if they get injured at work or injured in any form. It's just not an easy thing to be an illegal immigrant. And I don't care what your politics are. It's you're harming an individual person if you call immigration on them. You are literally ruining their lives.
Yeah, and like ruining their life. It's like you're also like directly putting someone in danger.
In danger,
and
that's it.
Especially in the States, especially right now with everything that's happening with...
Especially if it's a person of color. Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially if you know they're coming from a country in which they were persecuted for their identity as well. So, like, obviously probably not the case with Paolo, but, like, you know, if you call immigration on, like, someone who is queer and, like, left their home country to try to be safer in this country, like, and then you're calling immigration on them, that's, like, really fucked up too. Like, there's just so many layers, and it's never okay to call immigration, no matter how jealous or angry or upset or backstabbed you felt that someone, you know, pulled on you or whatever.
And so actually I want to bring up a really great piece of media that you can, that actually does a really good job at following a story of someone who is in the US without their green card and is like now like a grandmother and then tries to go through the process. And so if you head on over and watch Jane the Virgin, which is like an incredible 5 seasons of just like 3 women who like 3 generations of women who just like support and love each other. It's like a really, really amazing show, very well done. And they take on a lot of really heavy subjects. And one of them is the concept of immigration. And it's very well done.
Yeah. Yes. So anyways, don't call immigration. Moral of the story. Okay.
And I think we'll post something in our show notes that will kind of expand on the subject.
Yeah, because my rant wasn't very good and we're probably going to cut some of it out.
But if you listen to the uncut version on our Patreon. Okay, so scene 2. Are we moving on to scene 2?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I love this. Like, they walk into the apartment and throw the keys on the table, and it just falls apart.
Yeah.
I also really love like the actual like shot itself. I feel like it's a really great camera angle. It's just very like I really like it.
Yeah, totally. And also, this is like finally we get a plot that happens in Chandler. Like we're getting more and more plots that are happening in Chandler and Joey's apartment. Like last episode we saw that like you know, with talking to Nora Bing, they talked to Nora Bing, and then now like this episode they're in the apartment again and they're actually buying furniture for the apartment. So you're seeing a little bit more of like Chandler and Joey's rapport, which is great because they have got like a solid friendship throughout the show.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like this is I love, you're always talking about like the writing and how they do such a good job at like talking about one thing, but then also talking about something at the same time, or like creating a parallel.
Making it seem like it's a different story. Making it seem like it's a different story that's happening.
Yeah. And it's like, this is sort of the case. Yeah. Like they do it with their relationship a lot. You know, it's just really cute because they're just like in this really like committed friendship, like partnership where they live together.
But it is like, I think part of the reason why it's funny is because they're pretending that like they're gay, you know, like they're kind of doing this like, oh, they're acting like a couple,
right?
Which like, and then they're kind of making
like
fun of
so
the fact
silly.
that they're acting like a couple, but like, and like I don't know if it would be the same funny if it was like a guy and a girl, you know. They're basically like like making the joke that like, are they a couple? Like they're buying furniture together, like, you know, and it's supposed to be like it's like a simile or whatever it's called. Metaphor. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so then Ross heads over to Carol and Susan's house. And
what are your thoughts on this scene? Because I feel like we both have a fair amount to talk about in this scene.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, we do. All right. Okay, let's get into it. So,
so serious.
Okay, well, every time Susan is in the show or Carol is in the show, I just want to talk about them forever. So, like, that's just what happens.
Should we talk about Carol's outfit for a second?
Yes, the velvet green turtleneck. Yeah.
I can't tell if I admire her for wearing it. I can't tell if I like it.
It's so cute. I
definitely would want to give her a hug while she's wearing it and maybe like pet her a little bit.
But only stroking downward. You can't pet Velvet up.
It's true. But I don't know.
And it feels terrible when you pet up.
I know, exactly. Like, I just don't know if I like it, you know?
I love it.
Okay.
It was also like a really big thing in the 90s, that like green velvet in particular.
To be fair, she's in her house and she could just be wearing like a at-home tracksuit.
Yeah, wear whatever you want, Carol. Don't let Quinn shame you. I love Carol.
Sorry,
so
Carol.
much. Yeah, totally. Okay, so she's wearing this super intense outfit. But then also Ross is just fucking brutal when Carol's like, does this lasagna have meat? Because Susan's vegetarian. And Ross is like, I'm pretty sure that it is.
So vindictive.
So petty. Like, just like, oh my God. And as a vegetarian, that would suck. Like, if someone was like, yeah, oh, that's just... Susan has like so many reasons to be mad at Ross. I think they both just don't like each other.
Yeah, I think they both have like fairly valid reasons, although I do think that like, I don't know, it's hard when animosity starts from the beginning. It just keeps fueling something forever. Yeah. But like, I do think like Ross should get over the situation in a period of time.
But I also think that like they clearly, as the show progresses, they clearly like have, it's almost like a playful don't like each other relationship. Like, it's not the same kind of like don't like each other relationship that you like see sometimes with like divorced parents when they then date someone else. Like, there's this like really true real resentment. Like, I don't feel like Ross has like a real resentment to Susan. I think he's more just like, this sucks and I want someone to direct this suckiness too.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just do appreciate that they're actually quite open about it the entire time. Well, like, Carol, like, always calls him out on it.
Yeah.
No, actually, she lets a lot slide with Ross, but she does openly, directly say things when he's starting to become passive, like, too passive-aggressive.
Right. I think they're both, like, Susan's pretty good at, like, standing up for herself, too, around Ross. Like, we saw that episode about the skull, and she's like... like,
so good.
You know, it's like, yeah, they don't let you do it unless you take a course first. So good. Okay. And I find that it's so cute here how Ross and Carol share this like really cute co-parenting hug.
Yeah.
Like, they both like look at each other and they're like, oh, this is great. We've got a kid who's healthy. You talk about that now.
Okay, yeah. So I want to talk about the concept of when Carol is like totally and completely healthy, like referring to the baby or the fetus. And just how there's like some aspects to that there's like fairly problematic. Like, in general, in our society, the concept of like what is healthy is like used in like pretty arguably unhealthy ways. So usually when someone's like, the baby is completely healthy, they'll be talking about things like, oh,
they don't have a disability.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the part that's like, just because someone has Down syndrome or a disability, you know, it doesn't mean that this person is unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so using the term healthy is a very common word to use, but is not actually reflective of what you're talking about. And then therefore can really like alienate people.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm thinking like, what would be a different way to say that, you know? Like, I'm trying to think of...
Well, okay, let me tell you.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so first of all, they're at 19 weeks.
Yeah.
And so...
That's said in a cut scene that's not in the Netflix version.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. And so this is very typical. At the 20-week mark, you go in for a sonogram. And oftentimes, that's when an amniocentesis is done. I can't... words. But essentially that's when they actually take a bit of the amniotic fluid and they test it. And so they do some genetic testing there, which they probably would have already done at this point, likely. But they do some more genetic testing that's a little bit more accurate and comprehensive. And then they also, what's happening at this point in the development is that everything should exist in the fetus at this point. So every single tiny bone in the body has developed separately. Everything exists. It's just very, very, very small. And from this point forward, it's just getting bigger. When it comes to the bones, they are all cartilage at this point, because bones in this stage, they start off as cartilage and then they ossify and become hard, like they calcify essentially. And when they calcify, it's actually harder to see things. So this is like a key point where you can check to see if like how all the bones have developed, and also how all the organs have developed, because once they ossify, you can't see through them as well, and you can't see what's happening with the organs. And so this is like a point where you would, so not only are they doing genetic testing to see if there's any sort of genetic variances that need to be taken into consideration, but also physical variances. So like this is when you would find out like some, like what can be some pretty heart-wrenching things, like including having like open spinal bifidus, which could be lethal to the baby or to the fetus, and therefore the fetus will actually never come to term. And so this is actually a point that after like 20 weeks of carrying a baby, you could, or carrying a fetus, you could find out that the fetus is actually not going to make it to term. Right. And you like have to make the choice of either like carrying this fetus to term and have it die either right before or right after birth, or having an abortion.
So in that case, using the term the baby is healthy would make sense.
Yes. Yes, but at the same time, it's hard, because also what a lot of people are looking for are not just the like lethal aspects.
Yeah,
it's like also like I said, Down syndrome, or like there's a bunch of other like genetic variances and physical variances, and like finding out if your fetus is going to develop without a certain limb, or like those sorts of things. And so,
and it plays a little bit into the concept of eugenics, right? And this
exactly.
idea of like like making the perfect baby. The more the way that science is progressing, the more we have access to like a whole bunch of information that we didn't have 20 years ago when it comes to carrying a fetus, and allowing that fetus to become a baby. And like people come into situations in which they get to that point of 20 weeks and they realize that their baby has Down syndrome, and then they decide whether or not to end the pregnancy, which is like really, really messed up, right? Like, it's like a situation that can go either way, right? Because it's like
Down syndrome shouldn't necessarily be a reason to not have like this person exist, but at the same time, if someone was already in a situation where they were like wasn't certain if they could raise a child, and
like
financially, and then get to this point of being like, oh, I literally can't, then like this, it's sort of,
it's morally ambiguous, and it's like plays a lot into like disability politics, and like disability rights. And like, I think that
like the problem is that people are much more accepting of death of people with disabilities, and that is an issue, or discarding essentially of people with disabilities. Yeah. And to loop it back around, like I actually was at Mark and Allie, our brothers and sister-in-laws, 19-week sonogram. Like I was actually there for it, and I will say that it is actually very epic. It is also like one that people are very rightfully nervous for, and like it is a big deal to come out of it and be like, everything's okay, because it is the one that you can really find out some really scary things. And I mean, even in the case of Allie, who I've asked in advance to make sure I can say this, like she had essentially a situation where her placenta was in a spot that it shouldn't have been, or a more dangerous position. And so that had to be watched really closely. And like, it's a situation where it's like, you could find out that like the pregnancy is like too dangerous for the person carrying the fetus, And therefore, anyway, so it can just be really heart-wrenching, and it is a good, like, it makes sense that they're all like, oh my God, what's happening? Because...
So it would almost be better if Carol, instead of saying totally and completely healthy, if she had just said totally and completely fine.
Yeah.
Like something as simple as just changing that word to be fine. It's like, you know, it's not...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It plays into this interesting overlap of like disability rights as well as like reproductive rights, and then all under the guise of like eugenics and the patriarchy. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, and then we could... Oh my God, there's so much to talk about.
This scene is huge.
This scene is huge. We're gonna have to like... Oh my God, and we haven't even gotten into the whole Phoebe thing yet. This is gonna be such a long episode. Okay, let's quickly talk about... Actually, no, I'm gonna leave the whole gender reveal concept to the end of the episode.
Right.
To dissect that a little bit.
Oh, right. I actually also want to say... Okay, sorry, this is something because it links into this. So earlier on, they would have done other genetic testing where they would have gotten the quote-unquote like genetic sex of the baby.
So chromosomes.
Yeah. But then this is when you are actually given the quote-unquote sex of the baby, because this is when they actually look at the genitals forming and then give you a response. So when we're saying at the beginning of this episode that like everyone's talking about what, you know, Ross's baby's genitals look like, we're actually, because that's actually what they did, is that they literally looked at the genitals. And the thing is that sometimes those two results conflict because someone is intersex. Okay,
but so, for the record, 1.7% of human births are intersex folks. So that's 1 in 60. So like sometimes I think that it's important to talk about how, you know, intersex people are not just like rare anomalies, like they are real and exist. And so like when they got the genetic testing back that said that there was like maybe, you know, one chromosome set versus like the genitals of the baby, that could have been a totally different like they might not correspond in the way that we traditionally expect genitals and chromosomes to correspond.
Okay, so
we'll talk about that later. Yeah, okay. Oh, that's our friend Tanya. Yeah, so again, this is like such a trope in the 90s in which it's not even the 90s, it's a trope now all the time in which like there's this joke that like lesbian women look like men, and like all lesbian women look like men, or all lesbian women are like beautiful and sexualized. There's only 2 types of lesbian women on media ever, and it's like the hyper butch looking, like short hair, nose piercings, like lesbian, and then there's the like long flowy hair, like super femme lesbian, and that's an issue.
Yeah, totally.
We come in all shapes and sizes, guys. And okay. Anyway, so let's keep going because we still got lots to talk about. I did write a note that I think that it would have been incredible, and Quinn and I spent about 15 minutes on Monday, like, dreamily talking about how epic it would be if Carol and Susan had a spin-off show.
Oh my God, it would be so good.
I would just... And the reason why I thought about that is because this is the only time in the show in which Ross leaves, so there's no friend in the picture, and 2 characters interact.
Yeah.
Because that never happens. There's always at least one friend character.
Yeah.
In every interaction. And so there's this moment where Carol and Susan chat and they're like, oh, should we call your parents first or Deb and Ross? Or Deb and Rona, you know? And it's this cute moment between the two of them. And then of course Ross buzzes in. But there was this like very sweet moment between Carol and Susan, and I just was like, man, they should have just done an entire show about that.
Yeah, I really think that they should have, and considering that at the time spin-off shows were very popular, I feel like it should have happened.
I know. Clearly we need more queer shows on TV because we're just like begging for them at every turn. Okay, anyways, send us your favorite gay shows. Oh, speaking of gay shows, they're doing an L Word reboot. I never finished watching L Word.
I never watched it. I watched like 2 episodes.
Wow. Okay, so anyways, moving all the way on
Right. Okay. So then we have Joey and Chandler talking about who's responsible for buying the table while they're eating a lasagna over the laps when they have a counter with a breakfast nook.
Yeah, no, I really don't understand that. Why they didn't.
It's just a very well shot scene, though. I have no complaints.
It's so cute. Okay, but anyways, they parallel the idea that they're a couple, basically, is what they're doing.
Right.
And they're like, are we ready to buy a piece of furniture together? Is that something we could do? It's very cute.
It's so cute because it's also like it's also like real when it comes to having roommates and having friendships like that, you know?
Okay, so enter Phoebe at her place of work, just going about doing her job like people do. You know, some people just want to do their job without being groped at work. Paolo walks in a robe, and he is, I am to get naked. He wants to know if he has to get naked, and then he strips down to his nothings.
Which, okay, as a massage therapist, this is a thing, this is a common problem.
Wait, what?
Yes, you have to be very, especially if people don't have experience with getting massage, especially massage in our areas. It's like you have to be very explicit. Like,
what do you say?
Like, you want to know my spiel?
I want to know your spiel.
So you have to be very explicit. You have to sort of say, like, okay, in a few minutes, I'm going to leave the room and close the door, at which point you'll undress and get under the table, and I'll knock
Do you
to make sure.
hesitate before you say undress?
I don't say undressed.
Okay.
I would actually be more specific about which pieces of clothing are like best if
because
removed.
we're working on your back. It's better if you're not wearing a shirt or something like that.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and usually it's like with if you have an appointment with me, it's also explained that like before that, like whether or not someone is comfortable taking off clothing or not.
Right.
Because all treatments can actually be done over clothing just without lotion. Just FYI, everyone. If you have a massage therapist that won't do it, then find someone else. But if you don't want to remove your clothing, that's fine.
Also, other FYI, if you want a super queer positive, trans positive, body positive, consent informed massage therapist to come right to your door
in the West Island.
In the West Island, Quinn is there to the rescue. So go to their website and you can book a massage directly on their website.
Or actually, let's segue right into this. I just today launched my online private yoga sessions.
Yeah, I'm also doing that.
Yeah, but I just launched mine. Also, Emily does it.
Choose wisely.
We will hold it against you. We know who your favorite is.
Man.
No, I do think that you and I have.
It's not a great way for us to get clients. Anyways,
we should have a package.
Yeah,
between the two. Anywho,
so they're back in the coffee house, and Phoebe comes in, and she's got some shitty news. Basically, she comes in and she says that Paolo made a pass at her. We're putting little air quotes here. And then you see a little flashback, and he first starts by putting his hands on the back of her thighs, and then the hands move up to her butt into the point where he's fully squeezing her butt, and then she obviously is appalled, steps back, and then he turns to show his either erect or either large penis. One or the other. Neither one is appropriate.
Okay, so we polled people on this because when Monica says, was it, and then Phoebe replies with, oh, Boy Scouts could have camped under there.
Yeah.
Emily and I were sort of like, is it implying that it is very large and that's why Boy Scouts could camped under it? Or is it just an expression used when someone is erect?
There's an expression where you're tenting.
Yeah.
Which is like, so like camping.
So clever.
Tenting, right? So.
And so for me, I guess, because I feel like the scene of what's happening kind of implies already, because he like turns over on the table, it like implies already that it's erect, you know? And so I was always under the impression that it maybe meant that it was just really big. But do you want to know what the poll said?
Yeah, I do.
People 75% of people said that they believe that it was just saying that he was erect.
Yeah.
And 25% said that they thought it was about his size. Okay, so more massage therapy insight into the situation.
Okay, great.
Okay, so right around the time that I actually started going to school for massage therapy, this almost exact, although I don't know the details, situation happened to someone in Montreal, not far from our parents' place, which is where we are now. So essentially, it was in the news, and what had happened is that someone had, quote unquote, made a pass at or / like assaulted a massage therapist while treating them at a spa, and then the police were called, and they were basically like, well, yeah, like this is a thing that happens within your line of business, was like their response to this person.
I remember hearing
who
about
was
this
like
now.
a young woman, like in her early 20s, and she was like just absolutely appalled by their response that was just like so passive of like, oh well, like men will be men and you're in a job that like this is a risk. And so there was actually like a bit of a backlash in the news of kind of being like, this is not an appropriate response from police.
I remember this, yeah. So anyway, so he touches her butt, and then shows his erect penis to her.
So when you say it like that, I'm just like, that's absurd.
It's very intense. Like, and then she, like, and again, this is such another thing that happens with women in which like men sexually assault them, and then we feel as though we have to apologize for that happening to us. So Phoebe feels bad that she did something wrong to Rachel. So she feels like she owes Rachel an apology, and she says that, she even says that, she says, Rachel's gonna hate me.
Yeah.
And it's like, that sucks. Like, rape culture is so pervasive that like someone literally sexually assaulted you while you were working, and you then have to turn around and apologize for that happening. Like, it's awful. Yeah, anyways, so sexual assault, not her fault at all. But let's maybe not finish dissecting all of that yet until we get into the next part. But yeah, so then Joey and Chandler
are at the store.
Birds or insects? Who won?
Okay, well,
first of all, what do you think?
I like the birds way better.
I like the birds way better too.
Yeah, 86% of people liked the birds.
And then Joey has this hilarious line where he's like, oh, what? People are gonna like see our patio furniture inside our house and be like, oh, I'm outside again.
That might be the best line of the episode.
Yeah, it's one of the best lines for sure. Yeah, that's so funny. Okay, so we're back in Monica's apartment, and we get this beautiful, beautiful scene from Phoebe. And
like, again, she just, like, Lisa Kudrow just shines in this scene. Actually, like, this extended scene, like, because it gets cut in between. Should we just talk about this scene altogether?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Like, she just, like, the two of them together just play off each other so well, and they both do such an amazing job.
Yeah. And so Phoebe comes prepared. She made raisin cookies, oatmeal raisin cookies, and she brought milk. And, like, I just think of this moment where it's like, can you imagine that? And, you know what? I say, can you imagine? But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if someone who is listening to this has experienced this themselves. Like, having to tell one of your best friends that their partner assaulted you must be the most uncomfortable, unnerving conversation in the world. Like, and because of rape culture, Phoebe's going in thinking that Rachel's going to be mad at her, and
that she might not have a friend anymore. And that
and another thing that she goes into is she goes in thinking that Rachel's not going to believe her. And that's like, and so she actively sets up the situation in which she proves to Rachel that she can be trusted, which is like so heartbreaking, you know? Like, that she had to even do that.
Yeah.
But it's also so cute, right? Like, because it's a combination of her, like, making sure that Rachel knows that she's, like, not lying, but also a combination of her, like, giving her comfort food, you know? like, because she, like,
she
prepares
does such
with
a
the
good
milk,
job
you know?
of, like, being able to, like, create a space for the
Mhm.
conversation and, like,
Yeah.
and caring for Rachel.
But then I think that there's, like, this interesting parallel where Rachel, like, throws back the milk like it's a bottle of alcohol, right?
I know,
Like,
right?
she's
It's
like,
so good.
she's like, I need milk, you know? Usually you're like, I need a drink. But it's like, I need milk.
Also, I think one of my favorite moments is, like, better? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, Rachel's acting here is really great too, or Jennifer Aniston's acting. And then they both feel terrible, and they're both apologizing to each other, and it's like, you go, because I'm talking a lot.
No,
it's like,
yeah. So this is actually a point where I think is really interesting because, like, in the conversation, it's talking about kind of like self-blame in a sense, like women having to bear the responsibility. And then sort of Rachel brings up like, oh, but it's my fault that I unleashed him on you. If I had never met him, this would have never happened. And there's like getting in the right direction, that it is him that is the cause of the issue. But I find it interesting how then it circles back around and it's like still Rachel's fault. And then she sits down and she's like, how could I have not seen this? And there's just like this shame that comes with realizing that you've sort of been duped. And again, it's like playing into this whole, like this theme that we've been working with from the very beginning of like men coercing and manipulating women and like pulling the veil over their eyes in order to like get them to like sleep with them and want to be with them. And it's sort of like women's responsibility to be able to discern who's being honest and dishonest. And like, it's like this game played back and forth. And if you let someone through and trusted someone, then and you were wrong, well, shame on you. You're the one that
you didn't see the red flags, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And like, sometimes it is a matter of like, listen to the red flags, but also, you know, like why is it always, there's always like this spin around of like femme people taking the blame for men's actions. Yeah. And
so before we get into like the Paolo and Rachel back and forth scene, let's go into the next scene, which is where we reveal that Chandler and Joey, instead of buying the birds or the insects, they bought a foosball table, which is hilarious. Which, like, honestly, to me makes sense because they literally have a counter that has 2 stools that they could eat at. And
I know. Honestly, I do think this was reasonable.
Like there's only like 2 episodes in which you actually see anyone sit down at that table and eat. You only ever see people eating in front of the TV.
I know.
Or on the counter.
Like, it's like we put up the poll. I actually don't remember what the results are for like whether or not it was reasonable. Go to our Patreon page. It'll be posted there, the results. But it's funny. I give a lot of shit to like the guys in the show for not having their life together and stuff. But I actually think this was a very reasonable decision. Yeah. Like, you know, first of all, they're always eating next door or in front of the TV, and they have a breakfast nook. Yeah. And you're living in a small apartment in New York where there's not a lot of space for anything, and
there's not a lot of room for activities.
Exactly. And it's like, and this table gets well worth its use over the time. And if anything, it helps like pull people from Monica and Rachel's apartment of always hosting into like also allowing them to host some fun times there, which I think is just like really cute.
Yep. Yeah. All right. And then, so Monica goes to comfort. Well, Monica clearly is great at foosball because it's Monica. And she's super competitive. But I think this is the beginning,
though, of her being competitive. I don't think that we've seen it before. Monica. But, like, this is, like, the beginning where it's, like, you open up a door and, oh, my God, you guys, if you haven't seen Friends, everyone else knows.
Monica is competitive AF.
She's a competitive AF, and she's also very good at everything she's competitive at. Almost
Yeah,
everything.
True. Almost everything. Monica goes to comfort Rachel, and then Chandler and Joey go, "What are you still doing here, man? It's time for you to swoop in." Which, again, is this other instance of, like, where, like, you have to go and get women when they're vulnerable.
Yeah.
Which, like, whatever. We've already gotten into lots of this today, but, like...
Yeah.
I think there's another great line, and this is, like, maybe a contender for best line, too, where, like, Joey goes, "You have to show her that you're the anti-Paolo." And Chandler goes, "My Catholic friend is right." Like, obviously they're making a parallel
Like,
to, like, the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious, and yeah, oh my god. But, okay, so then we move into Monica's apartment. They're trying to be, like, cool, not watching the fight on the balcony. Can you imagine, like, someone opening your suitcases and dumping them over the edge of a balcony? But also what he did was terrible, so he deserves it. But, like...
Also, you have information on how they shot this.
Oh, yeah. Okay, because if you don't already know, none of the show Friends is actually filmed in New York.
They took some, like, shots of the building, which is, like, the outside of the building.
Yeah.
And around New York and whatnot. And then everything else is on a set in LA.
In LA. But for this scene, they flew the camera crew to, they threw the camera crew and, like, another director, I guess, to New York City to go to that building, climb up the stairs, and throw clothes out a window and get it on tape.
I just love that.
So good.
Because it's such a good shot, you know?
It's such a good shot. But it's like a half a second shot. And they spent all this money flying someone to New York to, like, for this, like, 1 second shot.
I wish we had that sort of budget for our podcast.
Yeah. Speaking of which, support us on Patreon. If you want to see footage of us throwing shit out a window, support us on Patreon. Monica goes... As she gives him a lasagna, she gives Paolo a lasagna, Monica says, "I really hate you for what you did to Rachel, but here's a lasagna." But it bothers me here that she says, "I really hate what you did to Rachel," and not, "I really hate what you did to Rachel and Phoebe."
Yeah, totally, because, like, he also did something super shitty to Phoebe.
Yeah. So, anyways, and then, yeah, and then Ross did this great thing where this is, like, the one redeeming moment of Ross in this episode, where he's like, "Paolo, I think I speak for everyone when," and then he just shuts the door in his face, and, like, honestly, I have to do that one day. Like, that's my life goal, to do that to someone who, like, fucks up one day, because that's just so good. So then they have this whole conversation, and she's like, "I am done with men. I don't want to think of another guy. I don't want to look at another guy. I don't want to even be near another guy." And Ross says, "Not all guys are going to be a Paolo."
Not all men.
Not all men. I literally wrote in my notes, I said, "Not all menning since 1995. Rachel says...
Oh, right, yeah. "I'm sure your little boy won't grow up to be one." Which, I don't know. Okay, put a pin in gender reveal bullshit.
Okay.
I find it actually a really cute way for him to find out, because he clearly wanted to know, but he didn't want to know, and
yeah. So this is the best case.
And
scenario.
he was frustrated that everyone else knew. Everyone was just being so rude.
Yeah,
like, that is just not the way to do it.
Yeah.
But everyone's just being super rude around him.
Rude, but, like, also clearly they were, like, taking the shit out of Ross. You know, like, it was like that's the kind of thing that you do to just, like, tease a friend, right?
But it's like it's something too big to just be laissez-faire.
I don't know, Quinn. Are gender reveals really that big? Wow, that was mad eye roll. I just got super eye rolled.
Okay, putting a pin in that is just like, it's like, clearly it's not a small thing, you know, that they're doing this with. But then, okay, let's take the pin out of the gender reveal bullshit. I feel like we've talked about this in the past, you know, like, gender reveals are problematic because just because your child's genitalia looks a certain way doesn't mean that's gonna, like, reflect anything of their gender.
Yeah.
Also, choosing that to be what you decide their gender is can be really painful and difficult for that child in the long term.
Mm-hmm. So I agree. It's definitely, like, it's an exciting thing. Like, any insight you get into what kind of life you imagine your child to have can be exciting, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, we project so much onto children before they even say a word, you know? And projecting gender roles is a really big issue, and it's something that we do literally. Like, everyone says that trans people make everything about gender, but literally trans people make things less about gender. And like freaking cis and straight people are always talking about gender. Like, I literally cannot go to a store and buy clothes for a baby without being directed to a blue section and a pink section. And all the pink shit has frilly stuff, and all the blue stuff has trucks and dinosaurs.
I mean,
like,
let alone also buying clothing for yourself.
Well, yeah, for sure.
You know, like,
oh my god, not even getting into that though. But like everything, like toys, everything, and like this is an exhaustive conversation because it's like it feels like everyone's talking about it. But I think we don't understand how pervasive it is to the point where like it literally defines how we picture a child's life to be when we learn what their genitals are gonna be.
Yeah,
right.
And like you also you like just you see this in Ross's face, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like having a baby is very abstract.
Yeah.
And like especially when it's just a fetus, it's like this little parasite floating in water and like a belly, and like it's just so abstract, and it's really hard to actually like wrap your mind around it and be able to like get yourself out of thinking like, oh, my life is not going to be the same at all, and actually try to conceptualize that.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of one of the ways that our society has sort of like leaned onto is by like doing this gender reveal, or really leaning into like what is the sex of the baby in order to like help people picture and like what their life is going to look like by creating all these expectations like, mm-hmm. oh, it's a boy, we're going to like play baseball and, you know, like do these specific activities, and then suddenly you can actually picture
doing these activities with your kid
when it's not actually what your child's interests are necessarily going to be, but it's actually what you're going to be inflicting on them, but it's going to be socialized in such a normalized way that no one's going to actually realize that's what's happening. And
which like in its intention, I understand it. I'm not against the concept of like being excited about your child's gender, because it's just another way that you imagine your life with them. But when you like celebrate gender reveals in this way in which you've now determined what their life is going to look like, that to me is where I draw the line.
So first of all, we're going to link a YouTube video.
The cake one?
Yes. That is, what was it called, Emily?
It's gender as decided by straight people, demonstrated by cakes.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, and it's anyway, it's great. You need to watch it. It's hilarious. But it's like, what's the right way to do it in a world where gender is such an intense thing that anyway, it's
it's hard to eradicate the gender binary in your own home when the gender binary is so pervasive. Literally, any moment you turn on the TV or step out of your home, you know,
right, yeah.
It's like,
and it's sort of like, should we? Anyway, I feel like that could lead into a whole huge conversation that,
like raising kids. Like with gender neutral pronouns until they're able to make autonomous decisions about what gender they identify as. Yeah.
Which I do think is, I personally, as someone who's trans, like think that is the appropriate way to do something, and what that, it can be difficult as a parent to do, but it's sort of like taking the weight off of the child and making the parents have to bear it for a while of like, what is this kid's life going to be for the rest of their life if they if their gender is not what they were assigned at birth, right? Or what society would assign them at birth. And it's like, that's what they're going to have to deal with for the rest of their life. And essentially it's like, it makes it harder for parents, but that's just what trans people deal with all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a conversation to fully unpack today.
All right. Yeah, sure. And that's the end.
Is that how this goes?
Yeah. They have one final tournament in which Monica kicks their ass.
Okay, wait. Before that, though, Chandler and Joey, when they come in.
Oh, they hug.
And it's so cute when they're like, hey, we already knew that.
And then they hug.
And then they hug. It's just, like, so cute that they, like, are able to then, like, still get on that level. And everyone's just so excited together. And, I mean, it's a really cute thing because it's almost like a gender reveal has an aspect to it, or like a sex reveal allows people to sort of like fully sink into the fact that they're having a kid.
Yeah.
I think the point is that
face that Ross is like, that's Ross's
yeah, you can
face.
see it in his face. And I think I think the point of this conversation is that like, I want to have compassion to that, because I think that through having compassion to that, we can start to then shift away from having like these like sex/gender reveal as like a way that allows people to have that feeling. And instead we need to start finding other healthier ways to help parents like latch on to the idea that they're having a kid and being able to like picture their lives and like have that feeling sink in that is not something that's going to be inherently oppressive and possibly traumatizing for their child in the long run.
Anyways, yes, I was thinking we should do a Chandler and Joey hug compilation on our Instagram. Because they have had a couple of hugs so far, and we could take pictures of it and put it in our highlights.
Okay, I think that's
it.
Everything for this week, folks. So you can follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, WT Phalange.
Also on our Facebook. Also check out our Patreon page.
Yeah.
And
check out our Patreon page, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably listening to an hour podcast. And right now we're at the 1 hour 48 minute mark.
And if you get the secret closet level of Patreonism, you get access to all of our uncut stuff. So not only do you get more content of like conversations and us talking in depth, and maybe like a whole conversation is cut out, but then you also get to hear us fuck up.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
So then you can check out me on Instagram, Kanien'kehá, and then also on Facebook and on my website, quinnkbrunet.com.
You can find me, Emily, at Emily B Yoga, or on my website, www.emilybyoga.com. That's Emily with an IE, not a Y. Thanks for tuning in.
Keep deconstructing and diversifying your media.
Woohoo! Bye!